Hey guys, it's Sandro here, and today's video is a detail on this classic Chrysler Valiant.
I don't know where to begin. Am I living a lie? Am I starting again?
Now I need to start off by saying that this job was a little different, in that I never met the owner of this car. This detail came about through a friend and work colleague that asked if I would take this job on, and through a phone conversation while I was still on break, the car was booked in. But due to circumstance, I unfortunately wasn't able to be there when the vehicle was dropped off or picked up after completion, which is a little uncommon, but that's just the way it worked out. Now what made this job difficult from my end was that I didn't have any info about its history, the work that's gone into its restoration, which seems quite extensive, or even its specific year, make and model variant. I did try to get that info, but again, sometimes things are hectic, and with the car sitting in the shop and just a short window of time to do a substantial amount of work, I just had to press on. The best I could gather was that it was about a 1970 Australian delivered Chrysler Valiant, repainted sometime in the short term, but during inspection I could see quite a variation of some older and newer trims and wildly different levels of finish and defects from one area to the next. In other words, a bit of a mixed bag, which can be quite common, especially with older cars being restored over a period of time. The interior, although in need of a good clean, looked recently upholstered. I could even smell some of the fresh leather, vinyl, carpet, and glue scents lingering around. The engine bay also looked to have gone a major rebuild, but was a little dirty, dull, and in need of some care. Now, to top it all off, I had minimal direction as to what the owner's issues, concerns, and goals were in pursuing this detail. Not much beyond a rough budget and the phrase, just do your magic, which firstly made me scratch my head and then made me laugh. But thankfully, the exterior repaint was highlighted as the main area of contention, which did give me a focal point to dedicate my time. And I had to agree that for what looked like a relatively recent respray, the finish of the paint was quite disappointing, with loads of unrefined sanding scratches, pigtails, compounding haze, holograms, and some weird chemical etchings fused in. I should also add that I was meant to be supplied with some matching touch-up paint to treat some chipped up areas, as it's obviously not the original single-stage paint and coat. But unfortunately, that also never turned up. In the end, guys, there was just so much that could be done to improve the finish of this vehicle that I was actually okay with not having all that clear direction and info I'm used to. All I wanted to do here was set the stage and background for this job, and also highlight that adjusting your attitude to a positive frame of mind can be the greatest tool of all in guiding you to success. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. And there was just so many positives here, one being that I get to work on this amazing and rare vehicle. I hopefully get to make a substantial improvement in transforming the paint and a few other areas to something this classic car and its owner truly deserves, and it's work that I'm blessed and thankful to have. With all that said, if I had to title this job, I'd call it my shift and pivot job, because apart from my early detailing days where I was still finding my way, I can't remember a job in the past decade or two where I improvised, pivoted, and backtracked as much as this one, which I'll talk more about later. But honestly guys, as you'll hopefully see, it was all good in the end. I hope you enjoy having a look at the extensive work and process that went into this car, and let's get to it.
I'm ready. When you're ready. Beautiful. Yep, that one's rolling.
Yep, if you want to, what if you come over here?
Yep.
I don't know if you can pick up some of the dirt on the white.
Yep.
Maybe we'll just start the shot and I'll just run my finger over it. Maybe the T's got the most dirt there. Right, and same with the gimbal overall. I'd like to shoot
6 feet tall, free on the dance floor. Immediately I was so drawn to you. The background dissolved into nothing at all. Then we danced like crazy. Euphoria in our little world. Force of magnetic. And I like the sound of your words. The sound of your words.
First up was the exterior wash and decontamination cleaning stage, starting with the wheels. My main goals with the wheel cleaning were to remove the greasy solvent tyre dressing, brighten up the white tyre lettering, and make sure not to use any aggressive acidic or alkaline leaning chemicals that can sometimes haze bare metal wheels. But apart from that, the wheels really weren't all that dirty. They came up great, and I was especially happy with how the tyre wall lettering came out super white and bright. Now, while you guys have a look at the rest of the wheel cleaning, I think it's important to expand on what I touched on in the intro about my not so ideal shifting and pivoting working method on this job, to understand what actually happened and more importantly, why it occurred. Pretty much every job I undertake starts with an inspection of the vehicle and just as importantly, a chat with the owner to understand what their goals, wants, needs and budget are. They're always given options to select from, and based on the condition of the vehicle and what they select, I'm then able to estimate how many hours I'll need to deliver that result, price the job, and importantly, schedule it into an appropriate time slot based on how many days or weeks the job requires. That's really what threw me off a little with this job. I didn't know if perhaps the condition of the interior, engine bay, wheels or trims were of major concern to the owner, if he wanted more durable ceramic coatings and protection applied, and just how far I should really go with the paint correction process in terms of dedicating a percentage of my time. All I knew was that I had a little over a week to get the work done. So after discussing these concerns with the colleague that brought me this job, we both decided that I'll focus on the paint correction, and only once that's done to a great level, if there's still time available, I'll secondly focus on the interior, then the engine bay, then the coatings, and so forth. Now, on the surface, there's nothing wrong with prioritizing time. In fact, it's something vital to do. However, there are issues with not doing certain steps in proper or ideal sequences, such as not cleaning the engine bay during the first decontamination stage, cleaning interior cabin after paint correction, or doing messy metal polishing after the paint has been finished. Those are little lessons I needed to be reminded of on this job, as it turned out that I did actually have time to do the interior, some light metal polishing, and an engine bay clean and dressing. But as I cleaned, polished and dressed those additional areas, I also recontaminated, lightly scuffed and swirled the beautifully finished paint that I put so much time into, basically requiring me to repolish about half the paint once again. Now, I could have easily left this part out and not mentioned it in the video, but I wanted to include it, not to moan or feel pity, but to firstly highlight that no matter how long you've been doing this or how experienced you think you may be, you can still make silly mistakes. And secondly, there's always important lessons to relearn. The biggest one from this job was now understanding to a greater level the massive importance of clear communication, clear direction, and clear, ordered pursuits. So sometimes you need to stray onto the wrong path to truly understand that you were on the right path all along.
Closely, right here is where we belong. And we dance crazy. Euphoria in our little world. Force of magnetic. And I don't ever want you to go. Don't want you to go.
Next up was the exterior wash, starting with a pre-soaked snow foam. I used a great foaming detergent mixed with a stronger alkaline leaning all-purpose cleaner for some added degreasing and stripping capabilities. As I've mentioned many times in the past, this is like soaking your dishes prior to cleaning. It softens, loosens, and dilutes the grime so that when I follow up with my pressure washer, I'll be able to remove as much of that first layer of contamination as possible in a safe, touchless manner.
Yep. When you're ready.
With the majority of the looser grime removed, which is what tends to cause washing swells, it's then time to more safely proceed to the physical hand wash to address the next layer of contamination. For this, I switched to an acidic leaning car wash detergent that'll be far more effective at treating water spots or mineral deposits, environmental fallout, and even light surface rust, though still great at stripping more stubborn dirt and older waxes and sealants. I started by cleaning the vinyl roof using a brush that will be better at getting into the pores of that texture and material. I then switched to a microfiber wash mitt, and panel by panel, I went over each section and trimmed twice to allow the detergent and mitt to clean as effectively as possible. Now, sometimes I'll follow up by using a small detailing brush to clean out the more intricate areas, but as I couldn't see any physical dirt or grime build up in those areas whatsoever, there was basically no need to waste time doing something that wouldn't render any benefit. Tail. Close with the camera.
Sounds good.
So we'll go all the way down and then we'll come back.
Yep. Whenever you're ready. After the pre-wash foam and physical hand wash, this is always the time to assess your progress to see if more steps are needed to decontaminate the vehicle. Looking at the water behavior, what we ideally want to see here is slow pooling, hydrophilic behavior that tends to indicate that there's no car wax or sealant residue remaining that needs to be further stripped off. Now, although the water behavior wasn't very hydrophobic and certainly flatter and slower sheeting than before I started, there still seemed to be a little something causing it to sheet a little quicker than clean bare paint should. That could be the last remains of a car wax or even an all-in-one polish, or some fillers the body shop may have used as a final polishing step in the car, and sometimes even certain types of more strongly bonded contamination can cause water pooling to fracture and sheet off more rapidly. But even more importantly, hopefully you can hear as I run my gloves over the paint that there's some sort of bonded particles that I can certainly feel with my hands. Now, usually this will be environmental fallout, but being that the paint job doesn't look all that old, or that this car most likely spends a lot of time parked out in the open, it'd be surprising or unusual to have this amount of fallout that usually takes years to accumulate outdoors. In any case, it was clear that a further mechanical claying step would be needed to pluck and remove that contamination. For this I used a fine traditional automotive clay and lubricant, running the clay over small sections at a time using just light pressure and short back and forth motions. After each section, the clay was folded several times to draw the extracted particles away from its surface before moving on to the next section.
And back up.
Now, as you'll hopefully be able to firstly hear, the clay worked perfectly to remove those strongly bonded fine particles, as the clayed areas sounded almost silent, while the unclayed areas still had that scratchy and gritty sound. But secondly, you should also be able to see that the clayed sections now displayed completely flat and slow pooling water behavior, which is exactly what we want as a sign that the paint is now clean, bare and ready for paint correction. Now, one thing I should also mention is that typically when we use traditional clay to remove environmental fallout or iron particles, clay tends to turn a muddy brown or darker grey colour as it accumulates those particles. However, that wasn't the case here. In fact, as all the particles were being removed, the clay didn't change colour at all. In my experience, this tends to point to something like clear coat or overspray being the culprit here, rather than the more common fallout. Now, the good news was that it came off relatively easy, meaning that it most likely wasn't overspray that occurred shortly after the car was repainted, but most likely at a later date, or even more likely on top of an existing wax or sealant, as it certainly wasn't as strongly bonded as some other overspray I've had to remove in the past. As a general rule, all surfaces that have a smooth, glossy finish can and should also be clayed. This includes materials like glass, clear plastics, gloss-painted plastic trims, and even metals. Basically, if it's a trim that can be polished, it's also a trim that can and should be clayed. Once the entire vehicle was clayed, it was then given a final pressure rinse down, and I then used both drying towels and blown air to remove all the standing and trapped water in preparation for paint correction.
How's your audio? Audio's all good?
Yep. It's good now.
Yep. Okay.
Thank you.
Now, just before we get to polishing the paint, there's a few important pre-correction steps, starting with an IPA wipe down. As I've mentioned many times, an isopropyl alcohol solution is very unique in that it helps remove lingering detergent and chemical residue that may be left over from a decontamination stage without leaving its own interfering residue behind. It also helps remove any kicked up dirt, dust, and even remaining moisture that can sometimes happen during the blow drying steps. And it creates the perfect, slightly grippy finish that'll help your masking tape bond better and more effectively to the paint and trims. Next was measuring the paint's thickness. Now, as you guys follow along with the paint measurements, what you're going to see is that there was basically little to no consistency in the readings that ranged as low as about 100 microns, all the way up to 1200 microns and even beyond where my gauge maxes out.
Okay, it's too thick here to actually read it.
In fact, even measuring on the same panels, there were differences of hundreds of microns from one area to the next. What this most likely means is that we're dealing with multiple layers of older and newer paint stacked over each other, as well as filler, and there's no way of gauging any sort of reliable average of clear coat thickness. That's really what I'm interested in knowing. Even the door jams were ranging from under 100 microns to over 700 microns, which is pretty insane. What this all means is that I have no idea how much clear coat I have to work with, and chances are that at least in some areas it will be thin and risky to go beyond a certain point, which is quite disappointing. Now look guys, I'm not placing blame as I have no idea who prepped and painted the car, what it costs, or what it was like beforehand. All I can say is that it's very inconsistent and not what we like to see as detailers about to correct paint. This is again a conversation I should have had with the owner so he can understand that there's a very real risk here in correcting the paint that he should appreciate and importantly sign off on. Next was the pre-correction inspection. Now, there's a whole bunch of defects that can make their way onto automotive paint, such as wash-induced swirls, moderate standalone scratches, rids or random isolated deeper scratches, water and chemical etchings, chips, scuffs, scrapes, unrefined sanding scratches and pigtails, holograms, haze, and even polishing burn marks. Unfortunately, as you may be able to see, this car and paint pretty much has them all in great abundance. Now look, I'm not too concerned about the lighter swirls, haze, mild water spots or holograms, as typically a very light polish can sort them out. But the deeper, unrefined sanding marks, pigtails and rids are concerning, and the couple of little burn marks I can just see on some of the aggressive body lines that honestly aren't too bad are still a great indication and reminder that I need to tread lightly, especially around those more sensitive bodyline peaks. I'd be lying if I said I wasn't concerned moving on to paint correction based on this pre-correction work. But that's also why these steps are so important to do, as they should set the right tone and frame of mind you need in order to avoid a potentially disastrous outcome. With all that said, I'm glad this car was in my hands and not in the hands of someone who may not appreciate or have the right information to proceed with caution.
And look guys, it's not life-saving surgery I'm performing here. I'm detailing a car and sometimes I need to step back and get out of my own self-absorbed head to remind myself that it's all fixable if something goes wrong and no one's in harm's way. So let's not elevate this to a bigger deal than it should be.
Because
I think when we do the 50-50, shining the light will probably.
it will really help, especially in that one.
Well, Mama picked the berries and she put it in the wine. You know everybody gonna have a real good time. We all on the back porch getting real high. Pass around the bottle of your mama's Muscadine. Can't you smell what old Bear's cooking? Them collard greens are so good looking. Man, I've been away from home too long.
Now just before we get into doing some test sections on the paint, I wanted to quickly talk about the glass and in particular the rear glass, which you'll see in a moment, that has a whole lot going on in terms of weird holograms, haze and scratches. Now at this stage in the detail, I actually didn't know if I'd have enough time to detail the interior, especially with everything going on with the paint. But the interior glass was just bothering me so much that I had to stop, give it a clean and investigate a little so I could understand what was going on. To cut a long story short, the front windscreen and side glass did clean up fairly well, though I did see quite a few water etchings on the exterior side that would need a good polish to get those panels looking better. However, the rear glass was a completely different story. The best I could decipher was that someone at some stage decided to take a sanding disc to both the exterior and interior sides of that glass panel, leaving deep rotary scratches that I could even feel and catch with my fingernails while I was cleaning the glass. Now, having a little past experience with polishing glass, I immediately knew this wasn't something I'd be able to rectify. It will need specialty glass sanding and polishing diamond cutting discs, which I've actually had done on some of my past restored vehicles. But at least now I understood what was going on, and I have to say that that rear glass was a new one for me, as I've never seen car glass that bad with those particular defects.
Chocolate promenade, lightning in the lemonade. I don't care how fast they play. Man, I've been away from home too long.
Yep.
So I'll just move it around a little bit.
Do you mind tilting it a little bit? Yeah, beautiful. Awesome.
So onto some test sections to discover what's going to be the best combination to remove the existing defects and amplify the gloss in the least aggressive method. Now, based on the inspection of the paint, there was little to no chance that a very fine polish, pad and technique would be sufficient to remove the defects to a satisfactory level on this paint. So a more appropriate starting point was using a medium compound with an intermediate foam pad and technique that, if the paint was on the softer side, could actually work well. Used about 5 drops of product on a fresh pad, dialed my machine to speed 4, used moderate pressure, and did 3 to 4 row passes in a set about 90 seconds long. So all in all, this is what I consider to be a light to moderate polishing set and combination. Having a look at the results, I was pleasantly surprised that at least 80% of the defects were immediately eliminated using this relatively gentle combination, which without a doubt points to a soft paint, also taking into account that there was a decent amount of compounding haze in the finish. That also confirms that this paint is on the softer and more sensitive side. Now, all in all, this could be a good option to pursue, taking into account the inconsistent and risky paint variations. But to be honest, I'd still like to deliver a better outcome. So for a second test section, I stuck with the same medium compound, but tried it with a slightly firmer light cutting foam pad to see if I could achieve a little more cut and defect removal. Technique wise, it was almost identical to the previous section. I just bumped my machine speed to about 4.5, used a fraction more product and pressure, and did an extra row of passes or polished for about 2 minutes in total. Having a look at the results, I can definitely see the improvement I was after. Having now moved into that 90% plus defect removal range, and even the finish looks improved with a little less compounding haze, which I think is due to the slightly extended polishing set that was able to better break down and refine the abrasives to finish up a touch better here. Now the finish will still need a second step to clean up the haze, but it looks like it should be quite quick and easy with the reduced haze and marring. I also did a few test sections around the vehicle using the same moderate combination just to confirm the results. And what I found was that in quite a few areas where I could see even deeper unrefined sanding scratches, pigtails and other defects, there was a need to hit many sections twice or switch to a heavier compound, but I still decided to stick with this combination and just play it by ear as I moved around the vehicle panel to panel. So I just wanted to be honest that on a vehicle like this, it's just so difficult to lock in a combination that could easily do on original OEM paint that has that better consistency. On cars and paint jobs like this, it's just a different ball game because of that lack of consistency. Now, an easier option would be to just cut everything back more aggressively, but that would also increase the risk of more potential burn marks. So I decided to stick with this less aggressive combination and only be more aggressive in a few selected areas as needed, which will be more time consuming, but also safer. Now, as I mentioned a moment ago, with this paint being so soft, it definitely needed a second stage with a finer polishing pad to remove the compounding haze from the first step and restore the gloss and clarity. Now, apart from choosing the right polishing pad, the other important part of finishing well on soft paints is to use a gentle technique. What this means are things like using minimal product, limiting the amount of heat, and being gentle with your wipe-off method. Hopefully you'll be able to see just how amazing the finish turned out with a much darker, richer, glossier and cleaner finish with that second step of polishing.
you're just going to start up the top.
Yep, I'm just going to start by dabbing it in. Just here. Yep.
Yep.
Okay. This might get a little bit messy. We'll see.
We're still in the moonlight. It's something sweet. Let it wash over all of me.
So with my paint correction combinations and techniques sorted out, it was then time to get down to business and start correcting each panel. I started by doing my edge work, which is using my smaller 1, 2 and 3 inch machines and pads to do all the finer and more delicate correction work. Generally, you should use the largest pad that's going to fit the panel or trim area, as it's always a more efficient way of working. Basically, the bigger the pad is, the faster and more aggressively it cuts. However, to achieve a great defect removal result, and more importantly, be safe as to avoid potential damage and excess clear coat removal around opposing trims, body lines and panel edges, smaller pads and machines are massively helpful, as they can get closer and more precisely remove defects where larger pads simply can't correct as well or as safely. Right, so maybe the same, we'll just kind of show polisher. But once that finer and more time-consuming edge work is complete, that's when your larger pads and machines should be unleashed, tackling the flat, open work areas of each panel in the most efficient way possible. In other words, guys, a good detailer is like a good driver who knows when to slow down for tricky corners and obstacles that require a little more control and finesse, but also knows when to go full throttle as the path opens up. I guess a few other things I can touch on here that may be helpful is that generally speaking, in a two-stage process, your first cutting step is always going to be the most time-consuming stage. I'd say typically about 70 to 80% of the work, whereas your second or final polishing step will move much quicker. The reason for this is that removing existing defects takes a lot more time, requires increased use of smaller machines, and working in smaller sections to achieve a great result. Whereas refining, compounding haze and marring in a second step is far quicker and easier, as you don't need to use smaller pads as much. You can in fact work larger sections at a time, and with even shorter polishing cycles while still achieving the same great outcome.
no regret. Happy before we get it. Another day to do it all again. Oh, we're throwing open all the curtains wide.
As I touched on earlier, a big challenge of this paint was the massively inconsistency of quality, finish and defect severity from one panel to the next. As I worked around the vehicle, it became more apparent that the top panels like the bonnet and the boot were far better refined than the lower door and fender panels that had much deeper and less refined sanding scratches from the body shop. This forced me to work even smaller sections at a time to obtain sufficient results and hit certain defects multiple times to get the finish to a satisfactory level. Reflection bang on, yeah.
1 second.
And your reflection, yeah. Just the hard part with black colours.
Yeah. Your face is obstructed. Yep, good to go.
Yep. Get another spot. It's also worth noting that the panels on this car were of monstrous proportions. I mean, just the rear fenders alone were about the size and length of a hatchback. Needless to say, it was a very slow going paint correction job, with each massive panel taking several hours at a time over the best part of a week to remove 90% plus of the defects and then come back and refine the finish to a high gloss, while doing it all in a safe manner as to avoid the high risk level of burn through that this vehicle and paint posed. So it was a very high risk versus high reward kind of job, but hopefully you'll see in the end in the final finished footage that it was well worth the effort. Once the paint had been completed, I then turned my attention to some of the other areas, starting with the metal trims. Now by this stage, I had just under 3 days remaining to complete the job. So I decided to make up a little bit of a plan on the fly where I wanted to spend that time. I knew I wanted at least half a day, if not a full day, to work on the interior, a few hours to clean and seal the engine bay, a few more hours to polish the glass and remove some water etchings and residue, and probably the best part of a day to lay down some ceramic coatings to protect the paint and trims. So still quite a bit of work to do within a limited time period. Now with metal trims, there's a few ways to tackle them based on their condition, such as acidic chemical cleaning and stripping, and light metal polishing that can firstly remove oxidation, then address minor swirls and imperfections to ultimately restore the metal's brilliance. The other route is far more involved metal restoration that usually requires heavy sanding for polished alloys and steel, or in the case of chrome, an electroplating or rechroming process. Now just like the paint, all the metal trims were a bit of a mixed bag as far as condition goes, with some looking quite good, new, or perhaps being new old stock, but as a whole, most of them did seem to require some heavy duty restoration work with lots of deeper heavy scratches and worn out chrome plating that obviously wasn't something I'd be able to address. The best I could do here was spend a couple of hours with the metal polish to just clean them up a little better and give them a touch more brilliance. So I don't want to mislead you in that I was able to transform them like the paint, but I do think that setting aside a couple of hours to tidy them up was well worth the time to give them that little extra pop. The next part I decided to dress was the exterior glass. Now from what I could gather, the front windscreen looked relatively new compared to all the other glass that had far more water etchings and scratches. But one thing I did notice with the windscreen was this etched in glue and adhesive staining around its edges. So I used my glass polish and macro polisher to clean that glue stain off, and then give the whole glass panel a great polish, which should also help the glass coating I'll be applying later bond so much better. The side glass actually had the worst water etchings of all, and I have to say I was amazed at just how much cleaner and clearer it was able to come out after a great deep polish. It's like I could now actually look through the glass into the interior rather than just looking at the etchings and stainings on the surface. So again, well worth the effort to put in a few hours to get that glass to a better standard, though the rear glass, as we saw earlier, was unfortunately difficult to improve on condition-wise. Next up was tackling the interior. As I mentioned earlier, most of the interior upholstery, vinyls, leathers, and even paint and trims look to be quite new and just in need of a nice clean and detail to get the area looking better. I started by cleaning the mats and boot liner using compressed air and a brush, and then spent the best part of an hour or so vacuuming and dusting the whole interior cabin from top to bottom. After all the dry cleaning was completed, I then switched to a wet cleaning process, starting with a few test sections just to see if a very gentle leather cleaner would suffice. As I've demonstrated in many past videos, leather cleaners can work extremely well to also clean vinyls, hard plastics, and a variety of other interior materials. So you don't always have to use more aggressive interior cleaning chemicals, especially when the interior isn't all that bad. And in this case, you'll hopefully see that it worked extremely well to remove just some light dirt, oils, and a bit of a greasy shine, to restore the materials back to a light new condition without too much effort.
So we're really trying to pick out that this part just can look a little greasier. Yep. It would feel slick and slippery. Yep. Very close to it. I can bring it out if you like. Maybe bring it out. Yeah, bring it out a little. On some of the interior metals, I used a non-abrasive polish to both clean them up and seal the finish.
And can you pick up like just some of the little marks and stuff? Don't know if they're going to come out, but we'll find out.
But perhaps the longest and most time-consuming part of the interior was polishing most of the painted panels and door jambs that did have quite a bit of swirls, scuffing and haze. For this I used just a very light all-in-one polish with a fine pad and solely focused on removing and filling in just light defects to restore gloss and clarity. In essence, this is the same process and goal as polishing door jambs, which typically have very little paint or clear coat compared to the exterior paint. So you should never heavily correct door jambs or interior panel surfaces, even if they do have deeper scratches, because unfortunately those areas will tend to have just a small amount of paint to work with. A light polish or an all-in-one primer polish like I'm using here is best to use just to get rid of some minor swirls and bring back that gloss while removing next to no clear coat, which is what your goal should always be. The final step was sealing and protecting the interior trims and materials. Now, although the all-in-one polish I used does leave a layer of protection behind, I decided to top it with an additional sealant that will not only add to its durability, but it also did an amazing job at adding that extra reflective gloss and saturation that made the interior paint and door jambs pop like crazy. For the remaining leathers, vinyls and plastics, I used my favourite leather sealant and conditioner that once again not only added great protection, but also added extra richness, saturation, and gave the softer materials a little more of a supple feel.
Yeah, looks really good. Yeah, it's actually looks really fantastic on the strings. It's great. Alright, let me just do a little bit of In the end, I did actually spend well over a full day on the interior, which was more than I anticipated, but I think it was well worth putting those extra hours in to get it looking pretty amazing by the end. So by now, it was coming down to the wire of the time I had left to put into this job. But I just couldn't move on to the coating stage without spending a little time on the engine bay, which is really the heart and soul of a vehicle like this.
The curious face of the moon embrace, beautiful soul, lost in the light, everything feels right.
Now on older classic cars that have additionally undergone extensive restoration and engine rebuilding, I don't like doing wet engine bay cleans without firstly running it by the owner, as in my experience, many of them tend to avoid it, as older engines and bays just weren't made as watertight as modern engines are today. And when you throw non-original parts and custom work into the mix, it can be even more problematic. So a much safer option can be a waterless wash process that, although may not be quite as deep and thorough at cleaning, can be a far more safe and responsible option to go for. Even more so than traditional washing methods, waterless washing heavily relies on good method and technique to firstly be safe in not scuffing and scratching the paint and trims, and secondly to produce a great cleaning result. The key here is to firstly remove as much loose dust and particles with blown air, and then working in sections, apply a nice uniform layer of the waterless wash solution and never aggressively rub it in, but rather do light, straight swipe motions, constantly folding the cloth to a clean side and using loads of cloths to gather the surface dirt and grime. After that gritty layer of contamination is removed, then you can safely buff the surface to a clean and clear finish. Also try to work in a top to bottom method, working with gravity on your side, take your time, use a light touch, and also you just have to be realistic that it has its limitations, so you may not be able to remove everything that you would using more aggressive chemicals and with more water and liquids.
Beautiful soul, lost in the light, everything feels right. Beneath the canopy of night sky, the curious face of the moon embrace. Beautiful soul, lost in the light, everything feels right. I dream of sunny days when worries vanish in haze. I remember the roses.
So after spending a good hour or two giving the whole engine bay a great waterless clean, I then used some masking plastic to protect the paint before grabbing my favourite engine bay dressing to seal, protect and amplify its finish. After I applied a fine mist over the whole engine bay and allowed it to sit, penetrate and self-level for a good half hour or so, I then came back with some compressed air and a cloth to better dry and even out the finish. The great thing about this dressing is that it's firstly water-based, making it very safe to use, and secondly, it works amazingly well over plastics, rubbers, metals, and even paint. And thirdly, it largely self-levels given enough time. But personally, I still find that I get a better outcome if I spend a little time blowing and leveling it out with a cloth. I gotta say that I really love the way the engine bay came out, and I was so glad that I decided to make time to give it a well-deserved detail. The final point to bring back up here is that although I did my best to mask, work cleanly, and minimize any issues, I did find that when I went back to do my final IPA wipe down and inspection in preparation for the coating applications, I started seeing a whole bunch of new little swirls and scuffs, chemical droplets, light etchings, and so forth that had happened during the metal and glass polishing and during the interior and engine bay detailing. The thing is that especially when working on softer black paint like this that has been corrected to a high level, any new little imperfection just stands out like crazy, so it's so easy to create new blemishes. Basically, it was a mistake on my part not to make the paint correction and final polish in particular the last step of this detail, as I did end up going back and spending more hours doing another final polish over most of the vehicle. Now again, this job was quite different for me in not meeting the client or having that clear direction that did throw me off a little, but lesson learnt not to stray off the right path, as it will bite you in the end.
Blue is the color of the ocean. Blue is the color of the sky. All my life there's been commotion. Calmness settles in your eyes. Sit right here next to me. There's nothing, no, there's nothing we should do. Sit right here next to me. There's nothing, no, there's nothing we should do. Close your eyes and see. It's all you need. Listen close as rhythm all around you. Hold it close, don't let it go away.
So onto the exterior protection stage, starting with the wheels. Now given more time, it would have been nice to give the metal wheels a polish and especially sand and clean up the rust off the lug nuts. But honestly guys, there's only so much time available and I was already into overtime by this stage. So after an IPA wipe down, I decided to use a favourite wheel and trim coating of mine that should greatly help in making the wheels far easier to clean in the future, help slow down metal oxidation, and give the finish of the wheels a little more pop and brilliance. The coating was dabbed over the area using a foam applicator, which I personally prefer for wheels, and then I spent a good minute or two evenly spreading and working the coating over the entire wheel face. Once the coating had flashed and bonded to the surface, I then used a couple of cloths to firstly remove the excess product and then wipe the wheels down to a clean and clear finish. I think with the now bright white tyre lettering, a beautiful non-greasy tyre dressing applied, and a fantastic wheel coating in place, they just looked amazing and kind of menacing.
It's all you need. It's all you need. It's all you need.
Yep. Next was coating the glass. For this I used another favourite dedicated glass coating that's not only going to give all the glass panels a little extra shine and pop, but will also add an abundance of slickness and hydrophobic behaviour. With the front windscreen, I broke it into two sections, applying the coating in overlapping and horizontal lines, but also making sure to get the coating into all the edges for a great even application. I then spent a little time to get the coating as even and level as possible with the applicator, gave it a minute or two to continue flashing, and then followed up with a very light final wipe with my cloth to remove a few very fine high spots. About half an hour later, I applied a second layer to the windscreen, as it always takes a lot more punishment, while all the other glass was just given a single layer of the coating that will still last longer than two coats on the windscreen. To me, the glass was one of the most improved and satisfying areas during this whole detail, as I just love the way it came out. But on the flip side of that, the rear glass just bothered me to no end. And if it was my car, I'd really make it my first priority to either replace or restore that glass, as it also can't be all that safe looking through that heavily scratched and hazed rear glass panel. It was then time to coat and seal some of the other trims, starting with the vinyl roof. For this I went back to my wheel and trim coating that I have to say, after debating a bit about what I was going to use here, it turned out to be the perfect choice. I just love the way it added so much darkness and richness to the vinyl, and what you'll also see later on once the coating has time to cure a little is that it was in no way glossy or greasy looking, but rather leaving a matte to satin sheen that just looks spot on in my opinion.
After that, I turned my attention to the metal trims, once again using the very same trim coating, applied with a very similar technique that, just like the metal wheels, should help in reducing oxidation, but also give the metal a little nice bump in gloss and brilliance. I guess something I could add here is that in my experience, coatings applied to metals and even non-painted plastics generally don't last as long as they do compared to coatings applied to car paint. I think it's just the bare metal materials that are perhaps more prone to UV damage and perhaps don't allow the coating to bond and edge to wet as strongly. But my guess is that on a vehicle like this that's mostly garaged and driven more sparingly, the metal and plastic coatings will still last many years. So onto the final stage of coating all the exterior paint. What to use here was again something I debated, but being that this car is almost certainly a garaged weekend driver / show car, that almost any coating I apply would likely last many years if not more, I decided to use a coating that excels on the look side of things in terms of added gloss, depth and saturation, which was Gliss V2. But don't let that fool you, as the new 2.0 version is also remarkably durable based on my own testing, so it seemed to be a great choice here to both protect and enhance the paint's finish.
Alright, maybe just step back a little bit and walk it out. Okay, here I want to show too. I'm going to wipe within the section to start with. Okay. And then I'm going to buff out the edges.
Okay.
Alright, and if you can, just show those edges still remaining, and I'll run my finger so just to show. And sort of go up that way. As far as application goes, Gliss is quite easy and straightforward to apply. Basically, work it in as you would most coatings in vertical and horizontal overlapping lines in an area about a square meter in size, and then by the time you've done 3 or 4 passes, it would have already flashed and be ready for wipe down, as the hazing, streaking and rainbow effects will display in its look. Now, while you guys have a look at me laying down the final paint coating, I'll start wrapping up this video. There's always more that can be done with any and every vehicle I've ever detailed. But I think with all things considered, this was quite an amazing and remarkable result that took all the hard work, cost and time that's gone into restoring this classic Valiant over the many years, and gave it that better refinement and finish to now really highlight what a beautiful, stunning and kind of menacing vehicle this is. Time-wise, I'd say a good 45 to 50 hours over the course of a week and a half went into this job, with about 2/3 of that being the paint correction process. But I was really glad to have that extra time to put into the interior, engine bay, glass, trims and coatings, which I think made all the difference in producing a more well-rounded and complete elevated finish.
I won't lie that it was a little disappointing not to be there to present the car back to the owner or to get his reaction, but from what I was told, he was extremely happy and grateful. He may also actually see this video, which although is coming out a few months after completing this job, maybe he'll drop a comment, I guess we'll see. In any case, I felt honoured and privileged to play a small part in this vehicle's restoration, as for many of us that are a little older now, cars like this can trigger fond memories of perhaps being in the back seat of our family car during a long road trip, or sitting on our dad's lap as he let us steer the car for the first time down the driveway. So although it may just be a car, it's also a reminder of a period of time in some of our childhood history that at least seemed a lot simpler, certainly a lot more innocent, and sometimes we need little reminders to stop and give thanks for everything we've been blessed with. Give thanks in all circumstances, for this is God's will for you in Christ Jesus. May God bless each and every one of you. Stay strong, stay faithful, and I'll see you next time. Alright, and we'll just do actually, we'll do the bottom bit, I won't do this top. Okay, that's fine. I'll actually close the door to finish it off now. Yep.
Tell you what you need to hear. Dragging round that ball and chain, pretending it ain't weighing you down. Long as someone carrying it will take the time to help you get. Some people tell you what you want to know. Some people tell you what you need to know. Going fast the foolish way, acting like you've been down here before. Only someone by your side to intervene before you hit the shore. you where you need to go. Surrounded by acquaintances, hoping they won't leave you there alone. Home to some